Hello YouTube, this is Mahadev the Thunder Wizard, and in this video I am going to share with you fifth dimensional spiritual practices that will speed up your shift into 5D. Alright, so this is a much longer subject than I can do in one video, but I will give it a try. This video is for everybody. Anybody comes on this, you can benefit from this video, but it will be especially meaningful to those of you who are practicing the Maoshan 5-element practices and or the Warrior 90-day Lightning Qigong. Even those of you who are doing the free practice like the Awakening the Immortals, I'm going to be sharing with you information that is going to help you understand why these practices are so powerful and why we haven't seen anything like this up until now in human history. So let me first tell you a little bit about the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is a dimension of light, energy, emotions, and non-linear time. As you get into higher dimensions, it gets even crazier than that. But these are important things to understand, because you'll understand why the practices that we've been doing, why some of the things that we've been doing that seem, maybe, just kind of random, or why are we doing certain things, and why do certain seemingly, things that we're doing, symbolic things, why do they actually have real power associated with them? I'm going to explain to you why. So first, let's talk about the 8 directions. So you see over here to my right, which is your left, you see somebody trying to give a 3-dimensional perspective of the 8-sided thunder wheel. So in this practice, we use an 8-sided wheel whenever we do rituals, whenever we do the 5-element Maoshan practices, whenever we do the spirit fighting practices. We are operating in this 8-directional sacred wheel. And when you're doing the moving practices, like the spirit fighting practices, the Maoshan, you're actually moving from one of these 8 directions to another at any given point in time. So let's start with that. Here's why that's important. If you've ever done any of the practices that I've taught, like if you've done one of the rune rituals where you face the north and you say Odin, Villian, Ve, and you go in a clockwise fashion and you state your intention, etc., etc. Why does that have so much power? Well, there's a bunch of things. As you see here, the energies of each of the directions, the magnetic energies, is very different, and so you're actually stimulating a sine wave and all that stuff. Even when I tell you that really doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot. But what we need to understand about the 5th dimension is that here in 3D, we are actually getting the spillover from the 5th dimension all the time. Light, for example. Remember I said that the 5th dimension is a dimension of light. So as I understand it, this is coming from scientists. And my experience with the 5th dimension personally backs this up. But according to scientists, the light that we have in our 3 dimensions is actually spillover from the 5th dimension. So that gives you an idea. I mean, it's like if you're in a pond and you're a fish swimming, and somebody taps the water on the other side of the pond, there will be ripples that will go overhead, and you'll see, if you're a fish, you will see the shadows. You won't really know what the shadows are, where they come from. They came from outside of the water, somebody that you can't even see. And that's what's happening in the fifth dimension. In the fifth dimension, there is so much light there that it just sort of like squeezes through the cracks, like the sun, for example. The reason why when people do sun gazing, I don't recommend that because I'm not trained in that, but people who talk about sun gazing claim to get all kinds of energy from the sun. It's because the light that comes from the sun, which of course we can't look at it. Try and look at the sun, it'll blind you. The light that comes from the sun is just the spillover. The sun is actually a portal into higher dimensions. It's a spillover from those higher dimensions, which is why it gives us life. So if you've ever had out-of-body experiences or if you've had a near-death experience, you've been to the realm of light. I've been there. I can tell you that the brightness of the light there, you know when you're there that if you were looking through your human eyes would fry. But because you're a spirit being, you can see in much greater light. So it is a dimension of light, and that light spills over into 3 dimension. In fact, all the light that we have here is a spillover from the 5th dimension and higher. So that means when you do spiritual practices, you can feel the energy. You know when you've done a true high-level spiritual practice because either during or after you will feel like a wave of energy go through your body. And that is actually the energy spilling out from 5D into 3D. And your physical 3D body can experience it and can feel the wave. For instance, in recent sci-fi movies, when people want to communicate to somebody back in time, the only thing they can send back in time is gravity waves. So the gravity will do something in 3D space and then people will get a message. There's one, Interstellar, the movie Interstellar is based on that. He gets into a 5D tesseract and he does things that affect the 3D space of his child throughout time, and she gets the message. Because he can't communicate, she can't hear, but she can feel and see the effect in 3D from 5D. Does that make sense? So whenever you do any 8-sided practice, you are going to tap into the 5D because 3D is based on 8 reference points. So 2 squares on top of each other, you put the lines together, we have this cube that we live in, which is 3-dimensional space. When you go to the 4th dimension, you double that, which means instead of, basically you've got 8 sides by 8 sides by 8 sides, so the number 8 becomes really important, and that's why facing each of the 8 directions actually taps you into higher dimensions. The practices that we're doing, these Maoshan practices specifically, I have come to learn from my guides, actually are designed specifically to give us more freedom in 3 and 4 dimensions so that we will have better ability to access the 5th dimension. And as I said, the 5th dimension is a dimension of light and of energy and emotions. So, when you do specifically the Maoshan practices and the other practices that we do, when you do the Maoshan practices, you are tapping into energy because you're working with the 8 directions for one. You're tapping into energy that is spilling over. You're actually creating a mini portal where the energy from the 5th dimension actually makes it into your physical body. Now, what I've learned about these practices is that, in my experience, they are the highest level energy practices that I've come across. I believe they're the highest level energy practices in human history. You're free to prove me wrong, but you'll have to actually do the practices to find out if you've experienced anything as powerful. And if so, more respect to you. I'm trying to get through a bunch of things at once, so forgive me. The other thing that you notice when you do the Warrior Lightning Qigong as well as the Mao Shan practices, when you do the Warrior 90-day Lightning Qigong, the Triune practice, which gives you energy from Qi, Qigong, the Kundalini Yoga, which rises up your spine, and the Heart Level Lightning Qigong, when you do all of those practices, you'll notice that you have a concentrated experience of a release of trapped emotions. That is a 5D spillover, because the 5D is a dimension of tremendous energy. So, how is it that when you do specifically the Mao Shan, the 5-element Mao Shan, how is it that doing those movements that you see me doing, in these various directions, how is it that it gives you such concentrated energy? Well, the reason for that is that these movements, you have to do these sets in the proper order, and you have to follow the proper techniques. Don't get perfectionistic about it, just do your best. But when you follow those specific movements, you're actually creating a diagram, like a rune. So if you know anything about runes, even if I'm not even going to do it, but if you trace runes in the air or you chant runes, you end up opening portals to higher dimensions. Now, when you do this with your whole body, you look at the person, it looks like they're just moving here, doing this, and making this movement, but in reality what's happening is you're drawing this three-dimensional rune, if you will, which has the power to open a portal to 5D. And so the energy that spills over, remember there are energies that can spill over from 5D into 3D. The energies that spill over are of a much higher vibration. Left to itself, here's what I've come to understand. Left to itself, these, what I'm calling 4D practices, the Mao Shan practices, the Lightning Qigong practices, these things actually give you greater power over the fourth dimension, which is time. Now, this explains a lot, because in 5D, time is not linear. You can go anywhere you want in time from the fifth dimension. And what I noticed when I was practicing this Mao Shan practice as a martial art, as it turns out, it is an energy practice that can be applied to martial arts. When I practiced it as a martial art, I found that whenever I went up against an opponent that didn't practice this art, I was always faster than they were, even if in 3D they were faster than me. So I've known people that could punch a thing or touch something, and if you do the thing where you grab somebody's hand and you see who was faster, they could be faster than me in all of those ways. But when I tapped into the spirit fighting, I never actually, got into any fights, but just for sparring or for demonstrations, I was always faster than them. In fact, it was as if I could get there before them. In fact, there were times when time would slow down and I could basically just sort of watch, and I could get there as I could feel them beginning to do something. I could strike them somewhere so that they wouldn't be able to, all that crazy stuff you see in the movies. I didn't understand why then, but I understand now. It's because it is a 5D inspired practice that creates a portal that gives you access to time. You can slow it down, speed it up. This is just one of the symptoms of a 4D practice, an energy practice that gives you power over time. So those of you doing this practice, you'll find when you're doing the 5 elements, you'll find that if you get enough of this energy, and you'll be able to predict what people are going to say, you'll predict what's about to happen, you'll make decisions that seemingly give you this ability, like you're able to predict, see time. It's because you're able to flow within time differently. when you open these portals. The more you do this practice, the more that high vibrational energy will give you seemingly these abilities over time. It also explains why whenever you have interactions, I have, maybe you have as well, because they're open to everybody now. The reason why we're moving, as we're moving into 5D, the reason why people are having more and more personal experiences with light beings and with extraterrestrials is because extraterrestrials are light beings, which means they operate in higher dimensions. So whenever you interact with an extraterrestrial, even if they slow their vibration down enough so that you could physically see them, you will feel a very intense energy coming from them. If they touch you, you will immediately feel a huge rush of energy and emotion that will go directly through you, and it'll feel super concentrated and powerful. That's because the fifth dimension is a dimension of energy. For example, in 3D, we only have one timeline. And that one timeline, you don't realize it, but you have chosen to focus on one thing, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously. That's a whole other subject. If you have a horrible life, you have a beautiful life, it's a result of choices that you have made that have manifested a specific timeline that you experience, where time goes from past to future. But in 5D, all timelines are available as potential energy. Now, in higher dimensions, you can actually see all of the timelines and interact with every single timeline. As I understand it, in 5D, the timelines are available as potential energy, but they're not manifest. And so you have all of that power and that energy, which is why in 5D, you just think something and it manifests, because you are vibrating at such a high level and your energy is at such a level. You don't have to plan things out. Here in 3D, we have to get the inspiration, then we have to make the decision, then we have to take action, and that's what solidifies it. In 5D, you just think it and it happens. It's an available potential energy, but it means that the energy in 5D is, for us, inconceivable. To have that amount of energy, to be able to manifest any timeline as you want, whenever you want. So anyway, if I didn't say this before, let me say it to you again. One of the reasons why we work with 8 directions is because according to physicists, the 5th dimension is inaccessible to us because we're like a flat plane. We're like a piece of paper that's flattened out. It's a cube, but it's flattened out. The 5th dimension is rolled up very tightly and can be found at the corners of the 3-dimensional world that we live in. And so that's where things sort of leak out into 3D. And so, but it's very compact. The energy is compacted into the 5th dimension. So whenever you do a practice that gets you closer to that, you're going to have a higher degree of energy in your body. You're going to vibrate, your vibration will raise up, which means that the light that emanates from you, which you won't be able to see with your physical eyes, will begin to increase. Some people will have the ability to start to see auras, and some people have the ability to see light beings better. It means that they're vibrating on a higher level as well. So anyway, I kind of got lost in all of it because it's very powerful and intense, and I look forward to sharing more of it with you. But the bottom line of it is that if you want to have energy that will vibrate at a higher level, which will give you more access to 5D experiences and give you a better transition to 5D, I don't know anything better than what I've been teaching. And now I understand that the practices that I've been teaching are at a higher level even than all of the high-level practices that have come up through history, because those are 3D practices. They're designed to raise your vibration within 3D. But when you start working with practices that work in 4D, you have an even higher level of vibration. And these will give you access to 5D. And once you get into connecting to 5D entities and 5D practices, you'll know what I'm talking about. The energy is absolutely inconceivable. Now, if you're like me, I'm a human being like the rest of you. I'm nothing special. I've been interacting with 5D entities. There are ways that we can do that. We talk about that on this channel. And I have been having some challenges. I feel good today, but there have been times after I've interacted with 5D beings that my mind and my body, they literally are coming apart, because I'm actually still integrating 5D vibrations into a 3D body, and it doesn't, it's not the easiest thing to do. But what I've learned is that these practices I've been doing, my entire adult life, have actually given me an ability to go deeper into that 5D connection, so that those beings can actually give more energy to me than they would have if I hadn't done these 4D practices that I'm teaching you. Convoluted, but doesn't make sense. You want access to 5D? I don't know of any other way to do it that'll give you a faster connection than doing what I'm calling 4D practices, which is the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong meditations, the practices, the Awakening the Immortals Qigong, which is free here on the YouTube channel, and of course the Mao Shan 5-element practices. So I offer them to you. Go check out the links. And now you'll understand when you do them. For instance, when you do the wood set, if you're doing the wood set with the Mao Shan, you finish it, you figure it out, you do it, you're going to feel energy in your body, and you're going to go, how did that happen? All I did was do some specific movements. Well, you actually opened a portal that opened you up to 4D and 5D. And now you have a better idea why. If you want that, these links are there for you. We'll talk a bit more about this because as I get these downloads, I'm going to share them with you. There's some meditations coming for the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. Keep your eyes peeled for those. I'm going to be uploading those very soon. All right. I wish you guys all the best. I love you, and I will see you all very soon.